Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. To all our veterans listening, we thank you for your service. To their families, your sacrifices do not go unnoticed. And to every other listener joining us today, welcome. Tonight we walk in the boots of a U.S. infantry soldier from the 30th Infantry Division, 119th Infantry Regiment, as he recalls his harrowing experience crossing the Rhine River during Operation Plunder in 1945. This is a soldier's story of courage, chaos, and resolve. Settle in and have a good listen.
We were dug in west of the Rhine, just outside a little farming village coated in March mist. I was with the 119th Infantry Regiment, 30th Division, under 16th Corps of the 9th Army. The roads had been packed for days, convoys of trucks, jeeps, tanks, all crawling east. The cold had settled into our bones, clinging to our gear and clothes like mud. We knew we were near the river. The air had a heaviness to it, and everyone walked or whispered like something was listening. Our officers told us little, but rumor moved fast. We were part of a massive assault, Operation Plunder, Montgomery's big crossing with the British Second Army, and us on the right flank. Word was this was the final barrier into Germany's heart, the last obstacle before we rolled into the industrial roar. I was nervous, but we'd come this far. Nothing was going to stop us now. On the evening of March 23rd, our company moved out of our billets and into forward concentration areas near the western banks. We stayed low along hedgerows and in tree lines, all under tight radio silence and blackout discipline. No talking, no lights. The cold made my hands stiff around my rifle, but the silence made my ears sharper. Deep thuds of distant artillery echoed across the ground, and somewhere up ahead, engineering crews were already working in the dark. We could make out the silhouettes of bulldozers, DUKWs, and stacks of pontoon bridge sections waiting to be hauled forward. Assault boats lay covered in tarps, ready for the push. German lines sat just across the Rhine, their positions hidden through thick river fog. Everyone felt it. We were about to cross a line beyond which none of us had stepped. It wasn't like France or Belgium. This was Germany. As night deepened, we hunkered down a few hundred yards from the river's edge, camouflaged under netting near the trees. From our position, we could see the flickering outlines of smoke pots spreading over the river. Engineers were slowly masking the banks in a rolling gray curtain. There was quiet, except for the occasional distant crack of a German gun, probing shots, maybe blind guesses. Still, they made us flinch. Our officers moved from hole to hole, whispering final instructions. Some of the guys made small jokes, nervous, forced, but most of us stayed quiet, lost in our thoughts. I looked across the open space between the trees and the river. In a few hours, we'd be in those assault boats, motor or paddle, depending on the case, crossing under fire into enemy territory. It hit me then. Not just fear, but something closer to awe. We weren't just crossing a river. We were invading Germany. The sun hung low over the West German horizon as the 23rd of March crawled toward nightfall. There was a strange hush across our assembly area, every man deep in thought, waiting for orders we'd been anticipating for weeks. That afternoon, we gathered in small groups behind the hedgerows south of Wesel, where our company officers laid out the crossing plan. They used sand table models and aerial reconnaissance photos pinned to crates, showing us the winding Rhine, clusters of German positions along the dikes, and likely strong points manned by the 1st Parachute Army. The British would hit to our left, with American divisions pressing on our right. Artillery, even naval guns, had been repositioned for a massive barrage just before we went in. Smoke units would blanket the far bank to hide our approach. We memorized sectors and enemy landmarks. It felt too quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath for what we all knew was coming. By early evening, the preparation intensified. Supply trucks eased in under the trees, and runners handed out extra bandoliers of ammo, grenades, K-rations, and smoke pots. Each man had an assignment. In my squad, I was on the oar, second from the front. The lead man would cover us with his M1, and the bar gunner was center left to neutralize enemy nests once we hit shore. The radio man slung his pack tight, checking extra batteries. We crouched around an NCO, going over flare codes and the schedule of the assault. First, the artillery would unleash hell. British and American guns firing in timed waves, minutes before our boat slipped into the water. If we saw green flares on the far side, those were friendly. Anything else might be trouble. I checked my weapon for the third time, blackened my face with charcoal, and tightened my chin strap. We were ready. At least we had to be. Darkness came slowly, stretching every minute longer than the last. The Rhine was just over the low ridge to our east, hidden now by smoke drifting from the shore. Engineers had started their setup, some working silently near the launch points with boats and bridging gear. In the shadows, shapes moved like ghosts, sergeants giving last-minute checks, platoon leaders whispering orders. My heart thudded harder each time I heard boots crunch past or metal click softly. Then came the word. H hour would be just after midnight. Every man silently nodded, as if talking might make it all crash down too soon. I sat against a tree for a moment, staring into the blackness inland, trying to pretend it was just another exercise. But the steady rumble of artillery getting into position made that impossible. We were about to cross the last barrier into Germany itself. The war was far from won, but it was moving forward, and tonight, so were we. The sun slipped behind the horizon on March 23rd, and with it, any remaining sense of quiet dissolved. I crouched low with the rest of my platoon in our assembly area, watching the clouds above shift into strange hues. Then, just after full darkness, the guns began. It started with a deep, drawn-out rumbling on our left. Within seconds, it seemed every artillery piece in the world opened up. British, Canadian, and American guns, hundreds of them, poured shells east across the Rhine, the muzzle flashes pulsing like lightning as far as the eye could see. The sky to our rear lit up with pale glow. The British had set up searchlights and aimed them skyward so the reflections off low clouds gave us a weird, ghostly moonlight. We hadn't even moved out yet, but the whole western bank felt like it was shaking beneath our boots. It was no longer a battlefield. It was a furnace being stoked. Earlier in the evening, we heard rumors that Wesel had been bombed into splinters by the RAF and the USAAF. The glow over the city's horizon confirmed it. Around 9 p.m., we caught the distant thunder of explosions coming from the north of our position. The British 51st Highland Division had begun their crossing. Their sectors, lit up in flashes, looked like another planet through the haze. Still waiting in the tree line, I lay on my pack and let the vibrations from distant shell bursts settle into my ribs. The noise didn't stop, not for a second. One continuous blast, like the sky itself was ripping open. When the word finally came to move, our column fell into line. MPs and engineers met us at the road with shaded flashlights pointing down toward the river. We passed tanks, half-tracks, stacks of ammo, everyone moving, everyone quiet. Step by step, we crept toward the Rhine, under the fire still hammering the far bank. As we got closer to the river, the ground became soft and soaked, trampled by hundreds of boots before ours. Sandbags lined our narrow path. Somewhere ahead, the engineers were already at work trying to build the first crossings once the assault started. Each time an artillery battery fired behind us, I felt it in my chest. Each explosion across the river sent a shockwave of sound as the shells hit suspected bunkers, MG nests, flak towers. Illumination rounds floated high over the Rhine, their parachutes casting a cold, metallic light over the water and ruined tree lines beyond. The volume of fire was relentless, like it would never end. Then came a brief pause, just a split second of silence, long enough to hear the river flowing. Then it surged again, louder this time. Someone behind me muttered, almost to himself, "This is it." And I knew. We were heading into the teeth of it. We moved out just after nightfall, the sky smeared with smoke from the artillery firing nonstop behind us. The path was churned mud, made worse by the DUKWs and GI boots that had passed through all evening. I kept my head low, stepping carefully as we followed the narrow track between orchards and brush that had somehow survived the shelling. The dike loomed ahead like a black wall, veiled by the faint haze of chemical smoke, sputtering from British generators somewhere to the north. Every few yards, I caught glimpses of plywood assault boats stacked near the embankment, their dark hulls glistening. A pair of storm boats with outboard motors sat idle, half submerged, where the engineers had left them. I passed a group of sappers muttering over cables and checking their watches. Timing was everything. The sound of barbed wire being clipped brought a tightening in my chest. We were getting close. As we closed on the flood dike, the noise of the guns deepened into a rolling thunder. Somewhere behind us, our artillery, tank destroyers, 105s, even some of the British 25-pounders, was still pounding the far side of the Rhine. The flashes lit the clouds above, but all we could see were shadows jerking in and out of the smoke. Up close, engineers swarmed like ants, setting up smoke pots in rows and dragging assault boats into place. One man quickly briefed us on how to use ropes to lower ourselves over the back of the dike without exposing a silhouette. A few yards ahead, someone had cut clear lanes through the barbed wire and marked them with white tape. We filed into position along the dike's base, each squad with its assigned boat team. A murmur passed down the line. Germans had zeroed the riverbank and might have live eyes in some tower across the water. That hit me in the gut. We waited in silence, crammed between the dike and the black bulk of the trees, weapons tight against our chests. Our captain passed by, whispering the same thing to each squad. Minute by minute, stick to the schedule. The first wave had to launch the exact moment the artillery lifted fire from the near bank to targets beyond. Any delay would leave us naked in the water. I checked my watch. 2 minutes to go. A set of flares popped farther downriver, dim against the smoke screen, maybe a signal from another unit. One of the engineers tapped my shoulder, signaling it was time. We rose as one, started climbing single file. The faint splash of motors and paddles told us some of the storm boats were already moving out. I peeked above the dike and froze. Beyond the haze, the Rhine stretched wide and black under the firelit sky. Somewhere out there, the enemy was watching. The word came down in a low growl, passed from man to man. Move out! My squad and I rose from our muddy crouches behind the dike's lee side, rifles in hand, boots heavy with damp earth. The night air was sharp and bitter. The wind off the Rhine cut straight through our jackets. We could barely see beyond the next man, the darkness interrupted only by scattered muzzle flashes to our left and right, where artillery units kept up their steady thunder. Under that cover, we grabbed the ropes of the assault boat, thick utilitarian plywood, heavy as sin, and heaved it up onto our shoulders with the engineers guiding us. Step by step, we trudged over the dike, boots sliding in the churned mud. As we reached the crest, it all came into view. The broad, black stretch of river, sheets of smoke drifting unevenly along its surface, and the far shore watching back. Smoke pots hissed along the water's edge, and somewhere nearby, a generator coughed out thick banks of oily mist, trying to cover our movement. But that wind, never still, always shifting, played tricks, forming holes in the smoke where moonlight caught the river. We were exposed in moments, dark silhouettes on a silver-black current. Shells began to bracket the banks, their whines turning into the punches of earth behind us. Somebody yelled to get low, but it barely mattered. We were already crouched, hauling the boat downhill toward the water. My heart pounded so loud I couldn't even hear my own boots in the mud. Our squad reached the edge alongside engineers who cursed under their breath as they steadied the boat. We piled in fast, rifles across laps, a bar jammed between two knees, one man clutching the squad radio like it might float. 2 engineers gripped the paddles, and an NCO barked for us to hold on to the gunnels. Then we pushed off. The boat rocked hard as we entered the current, low in the water, and packed elbow to elbow. I could see other shadowy boats on both sides of us, their outlines warped through the shifting smoke. We weren't alone. Other regiments were crossing further south, and we'd heard the 9th Army coordinated everything with the British up north, too. It was all happening at once. Pressure spread across miles of riverbank to stretch Jerry thin. But none of that mattered where I sat. fingers locked around the cold wooden edge, head bent low. Shells landed in the river behind us now, throwing up tall sprays that slapped back down like thunder. One pounded somewhere upshore, and I felt its tremor in the boat's ribs. An officer hissed, "Keep down!" as we neared midstream. Somewhere ahead, the opposite bank loomed like smoke-stained teeth. And I knew we were either going to beach that thing right into Germany or not come up at all. The night was thick with smoke and tension as we waited on the west bank, crouched low behind the embankment. I gripped my M1 tighter than I ever had before, listening to the rising rumble of outgoing artillery behind us. Our engineers, some of them only boys, readied the flat-bottomed assault boats by touch, murmuring among themselves as shells thundered overhead. When the order came, we pushed off into that wide black river, the current snarling at the hull. Smoke rolled across the water in thick curtains, torn now and then by the flicker of German tracers licking out from the far bank. The oarsmen grunted with each stroke, fighting both current and fear. We were exposed, just shadows moving over open water. The river felt endless, and the only sounds were the slap of water, the roar of artillery, and the sharp hiss and whine of shells seeking us in the dark. Midway across, the Germans opened up with everything they had. Green and red tracers raked the water. Mortar rounds whumped into the river, sending up geysers that rocked the boats and soaked us in cold spray. One blast landed close, too close, and I felt our boat lurch violently. To our left, another boat was hit dead on, lifted out of the water and shattered in a burst of light and sound. Pieces of wood and God knows what else swept past us as we fought not to tip over. I didn't see any of those men again. Behind us, our own guns hammered in response. 105S and 155S pounding the eastern bank. Tanks near the riverside spitting shells over open sights at muzzle flashes in the dark. The smoke hung low and swirled in strange patterns. Every flash illuminated something terrible, a building, a tree line, a man's pale face straining at the oars. But still we moved forward. We finally glimpsed the far bank, a dark strip beyond the smoke lined with trees and what looked like ruined farm buildings. It was closer now, but so far from safe. Machine gun fire stitched across the water in bursts. I could hear rounds snapping just overhead, some zipping into the river with sharp plunks. One of the engineers shouted to adjust course. The current had pulled us south of the planned landing zone. We jerked the oars, turning the boat tooth by tooth toward the dike that loomed ahead. Somewhere behind us, a self-propelled gun bellowed, followed by a German gun going silent. That gave us a few seconds of cover. As the boat scraped into the shallows, I jumped out into waist-high water, my gear tugging me down. I staggered toward the riverbank, heart hammering, eyes on the thin line of brush and cover, where the real fighting was just about to begin. The assault boat slammed hard into the eastern bank, scraping across the rocks and mud just short of the dike. We were under fire before we even hit the shore. German MGs raking the water, mortar rounds bursting upstream. I threw myself out, landing waist-deep in the freezing river. Rifle clutched over my head, I stumbled forward, boots dragging through the muck. One guy ahead of me fell flat, didn't get up, but there was no time to check. Our engineers shouted behind us, yanking the boat higher onto the mud, angling it for what little cover it could give. I crawled past them toward a crater just short of the dike. Shouts echoed from my squad leader, "Move, move!" Guys broke right. Hugging low ground, others rushed the embankment. Fires flickered behind enemy positions ahead. We'd made it to the far side, but we were still in the open, and we had to punch through fast. As we crested the dike, we ran into chaos. A few low-slung houses and bunkers lay scattered across a flat stretch of open land, poorly lit but bristling with gunfire. Muzzle flashes burst from a cellar doorway. I dropped flat and returned fire, only to have another burst crack over my head from a second-floor window. We moved in teams. One group laid suppressing fire, while the rest flanked left through a ruined fence. We threw in 2 grenades and stormed the building. Screams and smoke followed. A pair of Germans stumbled out, hands raised, dazed and reeking of cordite. Others weren't giving up. Someone fired from under a pile of rubble, and one of our guys went down. We moved building to building, trench to trench, boots pounding through shattered gardens and over broken fences. The fighting was fast, panicked, brutal, no finesse, just momentum and fear keeping us upright and moving forward. We finally secured a cluster of buildings near a ruined barn that marked our initial objective. A few Germans still sniped from a tree line beyond, but the worst of the organized resistance here was breaking. I saw medics already working beside the barn, bandaging a guy on a stretcher. Mortar bursts still thudding not far off. A radio op up near the dike was trying to relay back to battalion, confirming the foothold. More waves were landing now, their boats crashing in behind ours, crates of ammo and gear getting dragged through the shallows. But the sandbar was crowded and dangerous. Shells were walking the riverbank, and someone yelled to push inland. Officers were coordinating with frantic hand gestures, shouting above the roar. My squad dug hasty foxholes, set watch on the tree line. We hadn't cleared much, but this was our patch now. The Germans knew we were here. We weren't going back. We'd pushed off the riverbank under cover of smoke in the dark hours, and now, with dawn brushing gray over the Rhine, I hunkered in a shallow shell scrape about 200 yards inland, rifle cradled against my chest. Behind me, though I couldn't see it well in the haze, I could hear the engineers getting to work. The clank and clatter of metal treadways echoed across the water, followed by the steady hammering of pontoon sections. German shells screamed in from the east bank every few minutes, some slamming into the river itself, others searching for targets among the engineers. Each hit sent shockwaves through the ground. Still, they kept going. Bulldozers rumbled up and down the far bank as they cleared ground for bridging sites. We were told, hold the line, protect the river. Tanks couldn't make it across yet. Just us and the engineers and the fear, all pushing forward as the day began. By mid-morning, the sun broke through the mist and revealed more of the crossing effort. We could finally see flashes of metal as engineers wrestled long treadway pontoons into place, waist-deep in the Rhine, ducking each time incoming artillery came too close. I watched smoke plume upward after a direct hit. One of the ferries, maybe, or a half-built section. There was shouting, but even from here, I could see no one pulled back. They just kept laying the floating platform, sometimes working one-handed while dragging a wounded man clear with the other. Our squad was ordered to push farther inland, secure a farm complex on a slight rise to deny German observers the view of the bridging point. We moved house to house, drawing fire, biting deeper into the countryside so the river behind us could be more than just a death trap. Every step forward felt like dragging the whole war with us. Just before noon, the unmistakable drone of engines filled the sky. I looked up. It was the troop transports and gliders from the 17th Airborne, riding high and heavy toward targets north of us. Operation Varsity had started. Some of us cheered quietly, others just stared, knowing those boys were dropping deep behind enemy lines to carve out breathing room for our bridgehead. The enemy artillery didn't let up, but the engineer bridges had lengthened while we fought, slow steel snakes stretching eastward. I could make out one crossing nearly reaching the far bank now, tanks queued on the far side. One ferry was loading what looked like a self-propelled gun. They were finally getting the big stuff across. We held that ridge above the river, dirty and spent, praying the bridges would hold, and that those brave bastards in the water had one more hour of strength left in them. We needed it. After the worst of the river crossing, we moved fast. Morning light revealed broken hedgerows and low farmhouses dotting the east bank south of Wesel. Our squad pushed through wet pastures near Fluran, rifles up, nerves ragged. The German line had broken, but resistance hadn't vanished. In the village of Meer, scattered fire greeted us from upper windows, Volkssturm by the look and feel, older men desperate, firing blindly. We cleared them house to house, tossing in frags and shouting for surrender. One held out with a Panzerfaust, but our barman cut him down as smoke leaked from the attic. What struck me was the silence after. We stood in the yard among chickens and bullet-chip flower pots, stunned by our own violence. A few buildings burned behind us. Some locals stumbled from cellars, eyes hollow. I didn't know what they saw in us, liberators maybe, or just more soldiers in a war they'd already lost. By early afternoon, we were outside Bislich, advancing in ditches along a farm road. The fields were open, and every clump of trees made you sweat. We took fire from a hedgerow. Wehrmacht this time, disciplined, using a machine gun dug into a shallow pit. Our guys flanked them left, crawling through waterlogged drainage canals, while the 81S dropped smoke and he. They broke after that. We captured 5 of them, young and terrified. One shook so bad he couldn't light a cigarette, another gave him. From a knoll, we had eyes on the pontoon bridges back at the Rhine. That's when the tanks came. M10 tank destroyers and Shermans rumbling east, tracks slapping the steel decking. That sight, it meant we were staying, that we had a foothold. From behind us, I heard our own artillery firing steady now, smarter, more surgical, thanks to forward observers finally set up east of the river. We were no longer alone out there. Toward the end of the day, we pushed through the crossroads near House Lou at the southern end of the 30th Division zone. There, German resistance hardened. Paratroopers, real ones, with camo smocks and better training than the rest. They hit us from barns and tree lines with precise sniper fire and close-in Panzerfaust. We saw one of our half-tracks taken out, just gone in a flash and smoke. But we held, dug into the orchards and fields by the road. Our artillery zeroed in, raining steel on the woodline beyond. Eventually they fell back, leaving weapons and a few stunned stragglers behind. By nightfall, we'd secured the ridge overlooking the main eastbound approach. I saw more prisoners shuffled past us, hands on heads, while local women stood frozen near wells and fences. The bridgehead was wide now, deep enough to hold armor, strong enough to beat off any push. We hadn't just crossed the Rhine, we were keeping it. We'd made it across the Rhine, but my hands still trembled as I shoveled out a foxhole on the far bank early on the morning of March 25th. Less than 24 hours before, we'd pushed off in those canvas assault boats under darkness, struggling silently against the strong current, as artillery pounded both sides of the river. I remember the blaze of German tracers cutting the sky, the hiss of mortar shells landing too close, and the dull crunch of our boat against the opposite shore littered with the splintered wrecks of those who hadn't made it. Now daylight revealed just how far we'd come. Rubble-caked shoreline, scorched fields, displaced trees. But for now, we held the east bank. We were digging in, securing our sector north of Wesel. No one said it aloud, but the feeling was there. We'd crossed the Rhine. The river no longer stood between us and the heart of Germany. All through the day, the buildup behind us grew. Supply trucks rumbled over the freshly laid pontoon bridges, their tires splashing through muddy water around the makeshift causeways. Engineers, mud-streaked and glassy-eyed, worked with a kind of desperate precision, shoring up damaged spans and guiding convoys across with hand signals and whistles. We watched from our positions, stunned that so much activity could now cross what, the night before, had seemed an impossible barrier. Reinforcements poured in, tanks, half-tracks, fresh infantry moving eastward into the shrinking pockets of German resistance. The sounds of constant gunfire faded to sporadic bursts, and for the first time since the crossing, I could lift my head without hearing ricochets clang off steel. Not that it meant we were safe, but the tide was turning. Command had already started pushing divisions deeper toward the Ruhr. For our small part, it finally felt like we'd broken something open. That evening, as we huddled around our foxholes and cleaned our gear, I looked back over the ground we'd taken. Damaged assault boats, half sunk near the shoreline. Spent ammo boxes and torn uniform scraps caught in the reeds. The bridgehead was secure, but the cost of that foothold lingered all around us. Faces that had been shouting beside me that morning were now just memories. And yet there was no time to grieve. Orders kept flowing in, and the horizon now pointed east, always east, toward the Ruhr pocket and beyond. Word was that Field Marshal Montgomery's bridging operations along the lower Rhine had cracked open the last major natural barrier. Within days, we'd be encircling Germany's industrial lifeline. And though the war wasn't won yet, marching beyond the Rhine with the 30th felt like walking through Germany's last gate. The end was coming. But for those of us who made the crossing, it came at a price we'd carry forever.
To our veterans, thank you for your courage, your sacrifice, and your unwavering service. And to each of you tuning in to Radio America, thank you for keeping their memory alive. It's an honor to share these stories with you. If you've found meaning here, we'd be proud to have you subscribe and stay part of the journey. Until next time, this is Radio America, signing off.